Good evening, everybody. Thanks to everybody for attending this planning committee the 1st of March 2022. My name's Councillor June Molyneux. I'm chair of the committee. Please note that this committee is being streamed live on YouTube and we have some public speakers attending via Microsoft Teams. If you're a member of the public who has registered to speak, you'll have a time limit of up to 3 minutes. The legal officer will operate a stopwatch and will confirm when your time runs out. You should then finish, or if in the middle of making a point, wind up within a few seconds and finish speaking. Otherwise, your microphone will be muted. For ease, a pack has been prepared which contains the report, plans, presentation slides for each item to ensure everyone can easily follow the agenda. This is also available online. After officers have presented the report and speakers have made their representations, I'll invite members to make any comments. When you wish to speak, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to do so. And when I invite you to speak, please turn your microphone on, but please switch it off again when you've finished making your point. When speaking, could you please reference the paragraph number to enable everyone to follow you? If the technology fails, then I'll adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the problem. If this isn't possible, a new date and time will be organised. With that, moving on to item 1, apologies.
We've got apologies from Councillor Alex Hilton with Councillor Adrian Lowe as substitute.
Good evening, Councillor Lowe. It's nice to see you. Item 1, minutes of the meeting, Wednesday the 2nd of February, pages 3 to 6 in your pack. Could somebody move those, please? Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Item, declarations of any interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in the agenda. If you have a pecuniary interest, you must withdraw from the meeting. Normally, you would have to leave the room before the business starts to be discussed. You do, however, have the same right to speak as a member of the public and may remain in the room to enable you to exercise this right and then leave immediately. In either case, you must not seek to improperly influence the decision on the matter. Moving on to the planning items. Item 3A, Mediterranean at Robin Hood, Bluestone Lane, Mawdesley. Ian's going to present this item. Recommendation is planning permission is granted subject to conditions. I have 2 registered speakers, the supporter Mark Glaser and the applicant Ian Bamforth. Ian and Mark, can you hear and speak? Yeah. Okay. Ian, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the conversion of the existing building to form a single dwelling house and the erection of 4 dwelling houses following the partial demolition of the existing building. Members will recall that this application was presented to the committee on the 2nd of February, where the application was undetermined. A committee site visit took place on Friday. The application site comprises the former Mediterranean restaurant building and associated car park. The site is located at the junction of Bluestone Lane and Sidbrook Lane within a rural part of the borough at Mawdesley and is in the green belt. The application site is a previously developed land and the framework and local plan allow for the redevelopment of such sites on the proviso that the development does not have a greater impact on openness. The proposed development would essentially result in a comprehensive redevelopment of this previously developed site. The conversion element of the proposal would result in a reduced volume of development following the demolition of previous extensions to the building, whilst the character of the building will be enhanced through the conversion works. This is in line with the framework and local plan as regards the conversion of rural buildings in the green belts. It's proposed that the volume of development that would be removed through the partial demolition of the building is utilised in the redevelopment of the site. The proposal comprises 4 new build cottages of modest scale within the car parking area. Together, these would have a greater cumulative volume than that which would be removed following the conversion of the building. They would also extend into an area of the site where there is currently no built form. This would result in an impact on the openness of the green belt that is greater than the existing development and is contrary to the framework and local plan and must therefore be considered inappropriate development. As the proposal is considered to be an appropriate development, the tests of paragraph 148 of the framework are engaged. This sets out that very special circumstances will not exist unless the harm to the greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The applicant has advanced a case setting out an alternative scenario whereby the whole of the site could be redeveloped, including the complete demolition of the existing building. This would provide a development volume equal to that which would occupy the site on the completion of the proposed development. The benefit of the proposed development being that the original part of the existing building will be retained rather than replaced. The proposal also has the benefit of addressing an existing highway safety issue at the car park entrance through engineering works to the junction of Bluestone Lane and Sidbrook Lane that will be carried out in support of the development. Together, these factors are considered to carry significant weight that would amount to the very special circumstances required to overcome the definitional harm to the greenbelt, which must be accorded substantial weight in line with the framework. The proposal is considered to be acceptable in all other respects, and all other issues are covered in detail within the committee report. Overall, the benefits of the proposed development are such that on balance it's considered that the application is acceptable in line with the provisions of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Mark, would you like to speak now, please?
Right. My name's Mr. Glacier. I live in Sidbrook Lane. I live pretty much adjacent to the development. I've spoken with my neighbour, and we both feel that these plans are fine as they stand. I watched the last planning meeting on YouTube, and there are quite a few things there that we disagreed with. If you've been to the site recently, I understand, as you know, it's an awful looking place. It's the main entrance to the northern side of one of West Lancs, Chorley's nicest villages, and it's just appalling at the moment. There's dump cars, there's drug dealing, there's tipping around the back. As far as there was complaints about the junction, there's nothing wrong with that junction. It's been like that for years. The only problem with that junction is driving, people driving badly. As far as the volumes go, well, Bluestone Lane, take your pick in Mawdesley. In the last 5 years, there's been the Rigby garage development. They've squeezed 4 supposedly detached properties onto that. Each one of those is about the same size as the 4 proposed on this site, and yet this site is probably 4 times bigger than the old Rigby garage. Across the road, well, you've got Linrick Farm, 2 acres, what I would call mini mansions, got nothing to do with rural housing whatsoever. They've been built probably 6,000 feet plus square feet on admittedly large sites. That's not, that's got nothing to do with volume at all. So I really don't see what the problem is with the volume on the Mediterranean side. I'm very worried that if this proposal is not passed, this site could be like this for years. Since it was bought, I would imagine that site has probably doubled in value. And I don't know, I have no idea who the developer is. But I would sit on that site for years if I didn't get it passed now, and it will go up in value. And I also feel that, having watched it last time, I do feel that Councillor Boardman should probably abstain from voting. I've got nothing against Mr. Boardman. In fact, I quite like his houses and what he does. But he is one of the major property developers within Mawdesley. And I do feel that this doesn't really come across well. There's something that doesn't sound quite right to everybody. And when he said that he represented and said that most Mawdesley people were against this proposal, well, he never came knocking on our doors down Sidbrook Lane. And so I would just like to reiterate that I fully support the plans for this development.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know the comments that have been made by Mr. By Mr. Is it Glaister, in respect of Councillor Boardman. Obviously, Councillor Boardman hasn't declared any interest in respect to this matter. I don't anticipate that he has any interest to declare, so he is quite right to actually stay in this meeting and to vote on that matter.
Do you want to speak now, please? Mine's on. Oh. Okay, Ian. Do you want to speak? You're on mute. You're still on mute. No.
You might need to leave the meeting and come back in.
Pardon?
You might need to leave and come back in.
Oh. It is suggesting that you leave and come back into the meeting. He said, okay, I'll do that. I could lip read that bit. Isn't technology wonderful?
No, they can't hear him. He's asked whether we can hear him.
No, we still can't hear you.
Check his settings.
Go on, Matthew. Somebody who knows what they're doing with the computer. I mean, me telling him what to do is like the blind leading the blind. Oh, yes. We heard then.
Back in the room.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go for it.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And the points I would like to mention are as follows. So we've gone into the property. The property's been empty for a number of years. It is badly dilapidated and suffered significant internal damage due to vandalism. It's a failed business that did have 6 different leaseholders in the 2 years prior to its closure. Our scheme. In developing our scheme, we had regular dialogue with the planning team at Chorley Council and referenced the Willbrook application, which sits a few short yards away from the Mediterranean and does back onto the same fields and backdrop. Willbrook was recommended for approval by the planning officer, but was refused by the planning committee in November 2019 on the following grounds, and I quote, due to the number of dwellings and the regimented layout with a cramped arrangement of parking and hard standing areas which dominate the scheme, the proposal would result in overdevelopment of the site to the detriment of the character and appearance of the area. There was no mention of openness being an issue, and the refusal was upheld on appeal in June 2021. We are retaining the existing building along with the trees and hedgerows to Sidbrook Lane, which screen the site. The building is referenced by Mawdesley Parish Council as being a historic and iconic building. We plan to maintain and enhance this structure. We've designed 4 bespoke cottages of modest proportions, and the site layout is spacious and unregimented. Each cottage is individual in its design and to a high level of architecture and quality. Design hints have been taken from adjacent properties in Sidbrook Lane, and the materials will be considerate with those used in the local area. There's also an abundance of open car parking space. Safety. There have been 3 incidents of a minor nature in the past 20 years of this stretch of road, and only 2 in the past 12. We're enhancing safety further by reducing the number of daily traffic movements, reducing the severity of the vehicles, commercial versus residential, and adopting LCC Highways' request to modify and enhance the junction of Bluestone and Sidbrook Lanes. Support to the scheme. There were 3 official comments received from the public, 2 in opposition and 1 in support. So net 1 opposition from a population of Mawdesley of approximately 1,800 people. Policy and openness. The planning officer states in his committee report, and I quote, it is important to note that the framework MPPF 2021 contains no specific definition of openness. And in paragraph 28, whether the proposed development would have a greater impact on the openness is a subjective judgment. We acknowledge that a scheme will impact openness, but we also believe that openness is impacted by its current use and any other potential form of commercial use. We believe that we are also aligned with local and national policies. So in summary, a scheme is modest in its proportions, bespoke in its design, and of a high quality standard. We are retaining and restoring a historic and iconic building. The building is badly dilapidated both internally and externally and will continue to dilapidate. It is a failed business. Highway safety is significantly improved. There is little stroke no opposition from members of the public. We've addressed all of the concerns raised during the Willbrook application. The application is supported by Highways, Utilities and Ecology. site will become an eyesore at a focal point when entering Mawdesley. It will continue to dilapidate if not addressed.
Can you
We'll-
wind up now, please, Ian?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members. Yeah, she's confusing me. Don't take much. Over to you, members. Councillor Whittaker.
Thanks, Chair. When we discussed this at the last meeting, I shared with Councillor Ridden some fond memories of eating and dining there. And I shared some sadness that this place was having to go, but it's like many rural establishments that we know of that can't survive. We went on the site visit. Sorry, but just before I go, there was reference in the report to the green belt, and I'm looking at paragraph 14 about green belt serves 5 purposes. Check the unrestricted sprawl in large built-up areas. This isn't. To prevent neighbouring towns merging into one, that doesn't. To assist in safeguarding the countryside from encroachment, and to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns, which isn't relevant, and to assist in urban regeneration. That doesn't relevant either. So we went on the site visit, Chair, and you know, we looked at it, and Ian gave us a map showing the proposals, and pointed out significantly about, because reference was made to accidents, which we had that sort of some for and some against, etc. at the last meeting, and the road junction is being altered to the satisfaction of the county council. I regret the passing of this place. We did establish that part of it is going to be retained, the extended part is going to be demolished, but the other areas looked fairly sympathetic and with adequate car parking spaces provided. So I'm very much, we talked about Greenbelt and we'll talk about it later, but I'm very much in favour of this application, and I moved its approval, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Eaton, then Councillor
Chair. Can I just ask the officer to explain the special circumstances that we're allowing this development, or recommending to allow this development?
Through you, Chair.
Yeah.
So it's all set out in the report in detail. There's not any one particular circumstance that's considered very special on its own. It's more when you take the development together and the circumstances that have been put together. The scenario that the developers put forward, as I explained in my opening presentation, is that the site could be redeveloped with a scheme of a similar kind of scale if the building were to be demolished in its entirety, and could be considered policy compliant. So you could end up with a similar volume of development, but it would be entirely new build as opposed to including the retention of the building, which reduces the amount of volume that's available in this instance, which means that it results in it being an appropriate development. The building itself obviously has some historic value, although it's not listed or locally listed. It is a local landmark, and it has some local value. The sustainability benefits in retaining sort of the embedded energy that's in that building rather than replacing it. And then there's also benefits in relation to highway safety, where the current layout has been identified as being substandard by the local highway authority, who've asked for improvements that they couldn't justify under the current circumstances, or if the site were to continue operating as a public house or a restaurant. But with the development, it gives them the opportunity to seek improvements to the highway layout and generate a safer junction arrangement. And together, those aspects or those factors are considered to amount to a cumulative, very special circumstances, which is a judgment to be made when balancing that against the Greenbelt arm. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. I've got Councillor France.
Thank you, Chair. I did go on the site visit. I'm quite happy with this now. One of the things, I think it's paragraph 47, the improvement to the junction, it's sort of a sweeping junction, and whilst I do agree with the resident that it's poor driving to come into a sweeping junction like that, but if you made it more of a left turn, it would definitely slow traffic down. I don't know the area quite as well as some of my fellow members, but yeah, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Whittaker. Thank you.
Chair. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm afraid my opinion hasn't changed since last meeting. I didn't go on the site visit because I don't need to, because I know the site very well indeed. The officers have laid out in very good detail in the report as to the harm the development does have on the Greenbelt, and there is no argument that there will be harm to the openness of the Greenbelt with the development of the 4 properties to the rear. We're not debating that. We've come to that conclusion that there will be some significant harm, which you mentioned in your report. The question we need to ask ourselves is are the very special circumstances demonstrated in the report and by the put forward by the applicant enough, and do they carry significant weight to outweigh the harm of the 4 dwellings on the rear of the building? My opinion is they don't. The building is of historical character. It was a fantastic pub when it was opened, and when it was open, because we frequented it quite a lot with Councillor Ridden over there after this meeting, would you believe, on several occasions. It was a great iconic building, and it still does have some merit within the local area. It is a historical landmark. But we need to ask ourselves the question, are we going to set ourselves a precedent within this committee that very special circumstances can be demonstrated for the retention of a building which isn't listed, has little or no architectural merit, but has some historical context? We in this committee, for the past 10 years, or as long as I've been sat on the committee, are well aware of our limitations on our policy. We're quite open to development within the Greenbelt, so long as it meets our policy needs. One of the paragraphs, I can't remember which one it was, we state that there is no specific policy in relation to uplift of existing buildings within the Greenbelt. However, we do have when it comes to residential development. And although it may not be policy, it is certainly an unwritten rule that we will permit up to 30% volume increase on an existing site over and above the existing buildings on that site. And that is very well demonstrated throughout the borough with lots of residential development. I've just spotted the speaker shaking his head. He will find that Linrick Farm, by another property developer that moved into the area, was specifically that. That was a very, very large farm with some very, very large buildings on it. And I think even to this date, and I might stand corrected, they still haven't maximised out the volume of it, even though they have put some significant houses on that site. So we know on this planning committee that we're quite well versed to the 30% uplift in the Greenbelt. My concern is that we set this precedent now, that we demonstrate very special circumstances by retaining an old building, and that will come back to haunt us in the future. So I would move, unfortunately, for some, to refuse this application, and I'll do so on the grounds, and I'll quote Adele, because always asked me for this, that the proposed development will be inappropriate development in the Greenbelt and therefore harmful by definition. The development will also harm the openness of the Greenbelt and is not a sustainable location for housing. It is not considered that there are very special circumstances to overcome the definitional harm to the Greenbelt and other harm identified. The proposal is therefore contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework Policy 1 of the Central Lancashire Core Strategy and Policy BNE 5 of the Chorley Local Plan. And I'll look for a seconder.
Okay, Adele, you wanted to come in there before I go to the other councillors.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to make it very clear to members that there is no argument over the fact that the development is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. But equally, I want to be clear that as officers, we're not suggesting that the retention of the building is the determining factor in advancing very special circumstances. It is one of a number of factors, and the key issue in this instance is that cumulatively the very special circumstances amount to a significant benefit that outweighs the harm. You know, Ian mentioned it before in response to Councillor Heaton's question. The fallback position of an alternative development, although that isn't before us, is a consideration that needs to be weighed in the balance. So I would refer you to the Green Belt balancing exercise that is set out in your report from paragraph 69 through to 78 that actually sets out what those cumulative benefits are as very special circumstances. It doesn't rest solely on the retention of the building. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Adele. I've got Councillor Gabbett, Councillor Eden, Councillor Marwood. Councillor Gabbett.
Thank you very much, Chair. My points were very similar to Councillor Whittaker's, and I think Councillor France jumped in before me to second it, so I guess I would third the officer's recommendations. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Eden.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm still of the same opinion I was last time. I'm not going to elaborate on what Councillor Whittaker said. He explained it fairly well. The point I'd like clearing, please, is this setting of a precedent. Now, I believe, or I've been led to believe in my time in this chamber, that every application is judged on its own merit. So because we pass this one, it doesn't mean the one next door gets passed. Am I wrong, or am I, you know, that is my understanding. I haven't been here long, so I might have taken it the wrong way. Thank you.
Adele.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, precedent is a very difficult concept to get your head around in the planning world. Basically, section 38(6) of the Act requires all applications to be determined in accordance with the provisions of the development plan and any other material considerations. So in that regard, you're quite right that every application will be judged on its own merits against the provisions of the development plan. However, it is logical that other decisions are also taken into account. Our view in this case is it is an appropriate development. There is harm. However, the Green Belt balancing exercise sets out why these very special circumstances are adequate. Any other development proposal that would come forward in the Green Belt would need to go through the same assessment that's been done in this case.
Thank you very much for clearing that up. So, having cleared that up for me and listening to the officers, I'm quite happy to accept your recommendation. I think it balances in the favour of the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very quick because people have brought up many of the points I was going to suggest, and thank the officers for that clarification about precedent. I think officers are using their common sense in this case, and we are getting okay. I'm always in favour of restoring buildings where possible, and much better to restore and keep this building, which locally seems very important. And I think it will be a much improved frontage as you come into Mawdesley. And the 4 cottages at the back, I think will fit very well into the landscape. They're keeping the existing trees and so forth, and landscaping far better than the existing car park. So I'm very much happy to go with the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to give members a choice, I'm going to second the refusal, Chair. Sorry? I'll second Councillor Borsman's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you, Chair. Just to ask a question, that if the pub was dropped, it could come back with a greater footprint or an equal as what's being proposed. This is what I'm not understanding.
Through you, Chair. Yeah. If it was a complete redevelopment of the site involving the demolition of the building in its entirety, then it will be capable. Another scheme could be designed that would take up the site in the same way, applying
as this proposal.
Yeah, but without the retention of the building, it'd be a new build basically in its stead.
Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've measured the volumes off, and that's not correct, I'm afraid. The 4 dwellings to the rear and the retention of the building at the front, once the extensions have been removed, is significantly greater than 30% uplift of the existing building. It's about 150%. So the question is, the building itself, with the existing extensions that are on it at the moment, measured off, goes some way to mitigate the 4 dwellings at the rear, but it doesn't mitigate the retention of the building at the front. I just want to come back on another point, Chair, and I'll close up for the night. I've just been through the conditions, and if this committee is mindful to permit this development, I do note that we're in no argument here that it does have harm to the green belt and the openness, and I'm surprised that there isn't a condition in there which withdraws the general permitted development rights. And I just want to ask Adele if it's that possible to put in.
Adele?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, that wouldn't be reasonable because it's not required to make the development acceptable in planning terms. And essentially, if a new house is built in the Greenbelt, it starts a new chapter in its life. So if the house is acceptable, it's acceptable and it has a level playing field with any other house. So it wouldn't meet the tests of the MPPG to impose such a condition.
Okay, just to be mindful then, to come back on that, Chair, that each dwelling can be increased by 50% and can have rear extensions, side extensions and detached garages on the permitted development.
Councillor Whittaker.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the last one. The acoustics are not quite good back here. Just, Councillor Boardman talked earlier about volume. Beg your pardon, volume. Every pub that's been demolished, and there's been dozens of them, I can think of 2 in Eccleston alone, that have been demolished and built by houses, by 8 or 10 houses there. The volume didn't come into it. To talk about this in the green belt, there's a car park. It's about 60 metres by 20 metres at the back, as we saw. The harm to the green belt, it's ridiculous to even suggest that. And it'll make the site an awful lot better for everybody, including the people in Mawdesley.
Anybody who hasn't spoken wants to say anything? If not, I'm going to move to the vote. Okay. So I have a proposer and a seconder for refusal on the grounds that Councillor Boardman outlined. So that's the first vote. All those who are voted against the officer recommendation, can you please show? No, we're voting for refusal.
It says vote against the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, that's refusal. So we're not. That's what? Well, you seconded it, so that gives you a clue. You've not voted.
Blue, red.
You've not voted, Councillor Ridden.
Please excuse me.
Yeah. I know.
Councillor Heaton's voted the wrong way. Do you want to clarify?
Well, I'm going to be my speech. That's the fault, isn't it?
Councillor, are you sure you voted correctly?
No, I voted wrong.
Yeah, I was just going to say, can you double check to make sure that your inputted vote, and you can change it if you want. Yeah. Press the green button. It should say, right. Okay, Taz.
Thank you, Chair. So that motion has not been carried, so we'll now go for the substantial.
Yes. A substantive motion. Well, let's let that go. All those in favour of the officer recommendation to approve the application, please show. There you go, Taz.
Thank you, Chair. So committee has decided to grant planning permission subject to conditions for the conversion of the existing building with partial demolition to form a single dwelling house and erection of 4 dwelling houses with associated works. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Taz. If anybody's come for that, just that, if you want to go, please feel free. You don't have to stay with us. Moving on to item 3B, Town Lane Farm, Heskin, pages 45 to 64. Adele's going to present this item. Planning permission is granted subject to conditions, and I have no registered speakers. Adele?
Thank you, Chair. This application site is located in the Greenbelt on the southern side of Town Lane in Heskin. The site also falls within the definition of previously developed land and has a complex planning history, but in summary, planning permission exists for the erection of 2 dwellings and a barn. This application seeks planning permission to vary condition 3 attached to an earlier planning permission in order to substitute the approved drawings. Essentially, the revised scheme involves a minor material change that involves rotating the orientation of the dwelling by approximately 45 degrees in an anti-clockwise direction to make its frontage parallel with Town Lane. The new site access to Town Lane would be positioned to the west of the approved access point, giving the dwelling its own dedicated access, rather than sharing with the other approved dwelling and the barn. One objection has been received, which is detailed in the main report. No objections have been raised by any technical consultees, and LCC Highways requested changes to the proposed vehicle manoeuvring area within the site, which have been subsequently agreed with the applicant. It's considered that the proposed change to the orientation of the dwelling and the new access track would effectively preserve the openness of the Greenbelt, given the simple low-level surfacing and minimal other structures being restricted to a short section of fence and a gate. The proposal would be located entirely within the existing approved residential curtilage. Therefore, there would be no conflict with any of the purposes of including land within the Greenbelt. The proposed changes are considered to be minor in nature and would not result in any additional harm to residential amenity, the character of the area, or any other issues assessed and considered acceptable by virtue of the previous approval of the original application. Further, the construction of the proposed access would fall within the applicant's permitted development rights once the dwelling is constructed in any event. It's considered that the proposed changes to the previous planning permission do not change the conclusions with regard to the acceptability of the scheme, and it is therefore recommended that this application is approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Adele. Over to you, members. Councillor Whittaker.
Thanks, Chair. When you look at the history of this thing, starting at paragraph 32, just after 32, the relevant history of the site, there are no fewer than 22 amendments. It started off as a barn conversion, I think, and then it got stables, and then they converted the stables into another one. There's no planning reason to alter this. But a matter of principle, I think Town Lane is a narrow lane. There are issues about traffic going down there. An extra access would not be appropriate, acceptable in my view. So whilst I'm not proposing a refusal or anything like that, but I do intend to vote against the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'll look at every application in its own merits to support Councillor Idden's comments previously, and I've no issue with this whatsoever, and I'd like to move for the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Morwood, Councillor Beaver.
Happy to second the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Beaver.
It's right, Madam Chair. I was going to second it.
It's been 30. We'll go to the vote, please. So all those in favour of the officer recommendation, please show. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. So members have voted to grant planning permission subject to conditions in respect to this application. Thank you.
Thanks, Taz. Item 3C, Hunter's Lodge, Charnock Richard, pages 65 to 90, with an update on your addendum. The officer recommendation, Adele's going to present this item. Recommendation is that outline planning permission is granted subject to conditions, and I've got a registered speaker, the agent, Peter Gilks. Adele, can you present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks outline planning permission for the erection of up to 9 dwellings following the demolition of the existing buildings on site. All matters are reserved for subsequent consideration. It is recommended that outline planning permission is granted subject to conditions. The application site is located in the Greenbelt and is currently occupied by a motel and restaurant. At the rear of the site, there are several outbuildings and storage containers. There are also large areas of hard standing used for parking across the site and several trees on the site, mainly along the southern boundary. Around the site are residential dwellings and agricultural land. Members will note that three representations have been received in support of the application and 16 objections as well, which are detailed in the report. The Parish Council have raised an objection. No objections have been raised from any other technical consultees. Whilst the site is located in the Greenbelt, it is considered to be previously developed land given its current use. When considering the impact on openness of the Greenbelt, the volume of the buildings on the indicative plan show an uplift of approximately 31.7%, excluding the canopy at the front. The existing buildings on this site could theoretically be replaced with buildings up to a 30% volume increase, and this would not be considered to be materially larger in Greenbelt policy terms. Using the same approach, although what is indicatively shown here is slightly more, members are advised that this is an outline application with all matters reserved, and it is important to note that the layout plan is only indicative. As such, the acceptability of the principle of development is what is being considered. The final layout could be altered to ensure that the development does not exceed a 30% volume uplift, and as such it is recommended that a condition is imposed to control this. The removal of the buildings, which are spread across the site, also needs to be considered, and the siting of up to 9 dwellings set within the gardens would provide a sense of openness around the development. Again, scale is not applied for at this stage, but an appropriate condition is also recommended on the basis that 2 storeys is considered to be a maximum height. In addition, whilst the dwellings and garages shown on the indicative layout go beyond the footprint of the existing buildings, gardens serving them would be within the extent of previously developed land and would not encroach further into the Greenbelt. As such, it is not considered that the proposal would have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt, and as I said at the beginning, it is considered acceptable and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Peter, do you want to speak now?
Sorry. Madam Chairman and members of the committee, on behalf of my client and myself, I take this opportunity to correct and respond to the comments contained in the public objections to this application. Firstly, I have not lied in an attempt to rush through the process. I was told by my client, and he believed by a copy of this lease which I have here and provided to me, the hotel and restaurant were both held on this lease expiring on the 31st of July 2021. It was only subsequently discovered by my client's solicitors by applying to the land registry the restaurant had been separated off in 2005 and subject to a separate lease ending 21st of February 2025. Nevertheless, defamatory comments published in a public document are an unacceptable slur on my integrity and denigrate my respected reputation and professional standing in the town and county where I've practiced as a charter surveyor for over 50 years. Consequently, these comments are now subject of legal action. My client is also pursuing his legal rights on several breaches of covenants in both the hotel and restaurant leases and the arrears that have accrued amounting to many thousands of pounds and over several years going back to well before lockdown. In the comments, it's been stated the site is home to 4 households and many people living in Hunter's Lodge. There is only 1 residence on site for the proprietor or manager of the business. Therefore, all others living there are in breach of the lease terms and planning permission, an issue which you may ask your enforcement officer to investigate. Loss of employment opportunities is unfortunate, but clearly the businesses are and have been economically unviable for years, as evidenced by the amassing of arrears, failure to pay the correct amount of rent and fulfil other obligations, for example, repair and maintenance of the buildings, which are now in a neglected and poor state. Access will be dangerous is again misleading and incredulous. vehicle movements generated by the use as a hotel and restaurant and the 4 households are 2, if not 3 times greater than 9 residences. Therefore, the access will be safer, a fact acknowledged by the Highways engineer. Madam Chairman and members of the committee, I respectfully request you accept your officer recommendation and approve this application, and I thank you for the opportunity of addressing you. Thank you.
Okay, before I bring members in, Adele, you want to come in?
I do, yes. Unfortunately, I've just realised that the recommended conditions haven't been included in the addendum. I'll blame it on the computer. However, I think, therefore, what I would suggest is if members are minded to approve it, that the conditions are delegated to the director in consultation with chair and vice chair, and that would be an update to the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, with that, it's over to you, members. Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In general, I don't have any issues with the application as an outline at this stage. I'm surprised that the existing building doesn't be retained and we're putting another 9 back. I'll accept this one and I'll accept this as a 30% uplift. So, on that ground, I was looking for the condition, Adele, you're absolutely right, because looking at the photographs of the site and knowing the site well, the majority of the buildings on that site are single storey. And I don't think it's uncommon for us within the committee or the officers to recommend that the restriction of 1.5 stories is more appropriate in a certain open greenbelt environment. The difficulty with 2 stories, as you know, is 2 stories have a roof and you can't limit the height of that building. So I'd more than happily support the officer's recommendation, but could we look at, and I'll ask Adele the question, the limitation of the 9 dwellings to 1.5 stories?
I hear what you say, Councillor Boardman. Given that we haven't got the design details, if you go for a height limit, you might end up with more of a spread, which can be counterproductive. So I think what we would suggest is that the height limit is at 2 stories. And that is controlled as well by the volume uplift. If you're too prescriptive to say 1.5 stories, then the volume and the spread of the buildings would then actually take up more of the site. So what you gain in terms of the height, you're going to be losing in terms of the sense of spatialness around the buildings and the character of the area as well.
Okay. Councillor Heaton.
Thank you, Chair. I know this site very well, ever since I was a toddler, in fact. Used to be the bungalow calf, transport calf, before they even built the Preston bypass. My dad used to deliver milk there in the churns. I'm sorry to see it fall into bad repair. The restaurant did have a major upgrade about 10 years back, and was the Baku Lounge for a while, which was quite popular for about 12 months. But in recent times, it has not had the turnover as the applicant states. So I can't vote for it, but I'll not be voting against it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So, Councillor Beaver.
I don't think anybody actually proposed it, have they?
Yes, he proposed it, but it's not been seconded, I was going to say. Anyone else wish to comment? If not, I'll move to the vote. So all those in favour of the officer recommendation, in a minute when it comes up. There we go.
Can I just interject, Chair, just to confirm that what we're voting for? So you're voting on the officer recommendation,
Yeah,
and on the basis that the conditions for the application will be delegated to the director and the chair of planning.
Yeah, and vice chair.
And vice chair.
Okay. Councillor Marwood, you've not. You all check that you voted the how you wanted to. Okay, it has.
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to grant plan permission subject to conditions, and obviously those conditions have been delegated to be considered and by chair and the director of planning.
Vice chair.
And vice chair,
Yeah,
sorry, and the vice chair, sorry. So, thank you, Chair.
Okay, if you want to go, Peter, that's fine. Okay. Moving on, item 3D, doorway to value, Whittle-Le-Woods, pages 91 to 126, with an update on your addendum. Ian's going to present this item, and I have one registered speaker, Thomas Lord. Thomas, can you hear us?
I can, Chair, yes. Can you hear me?
Excellent, yes I can.
Good.
Ian, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a two-storey extension to the south side of the existing building and includes the installation of overcladding to the existing store frontage, solar photovoltaic panels to the roof and alterations to the car park. The application site comprises the doorway to value furniture store, which is located on the A6 in Whittle-Le-Woods and is in the Greenbelt. The application site is previously developed land and the proposal seeks to extend the existing building. The framework and local plan allow for the extension of buildings in the Greenbelt provided that it doesn't result in disproportionate additions over and above the size of the original building. In this instance, the original building has already been added to extensively and therefore the cumulative impact of any further extensions would result in a disproportionate addition over and above the size of the original building, which is contrary to the framework and must therefore be considered inappropriate development. The proposal is, as the proposal is considered to be inappropriate development, the tests of paragraph 148 of the framework are engaged. This sets out that very special circumstances will not exist unless the harm to the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The applicant has advanced a case setting out that the development is necessary to secure the long-term sustainability of a long-established local business and thereby protect existing employment. The development would also have the benefit of generating additional jobs and would rejuvenate the existing site and provide, it would improve the energy efficiency of the building through supporting a 33.65% improvement in CO2 emissions over and above the building regulations baseline. It's also the case that the extension of the building represents the only opportunity for the expansion and retention of this business within Chorley. Together, these factors are considered to carry significant weight that would amount to the very special circumstances required to overcome the definitional harm to the Greenbelt, which must be accorded substantial weight in line with the framework. Given the scale of the proposed development and circumstances, that it would be an extension to an existing building to support an existing local business, it would not detract from the function, vitality or viability of Chorley Town Centre or any nearby district centres and is considered to comply with policy EP9 of the Chorley local plan. In relation to matters of design, the proposed development would be suitable in the context of the site and wouldn't be harmful to local character. There would be a significant degree of separation between the development and neighbouring residential occupiers, such that it would not result in any unacceptable harm to the amenity and living conditions of nearby residents. The proposal is considered to be acceptable in all other respects and all issues are covered in detail within the committee report. Overall, the benefits of the proposed development are such that on balance it's considered that the application is acceptable in line with the provisions of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Thomas, do you want to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Thomas Lord. I am the planning agent acting on behalf of the applicant who are owners of the Doorway to Value furniture store. Doorway to Value has been located at the application site since the mid-1970s and currently employs up to 37 members of staff, many of whom live locally, and it attracts a customer base from across Lancashire and Greater Manchester. As I'm sure you're aware, physical retailing has been severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has seen retailers forced to close their doors to customers for significant periods, drastically restricting their profitability and ability to retain staff. The future of physical retailing has therefore become very precarious. This has been exacerbated by the growth of online retailing. In order to maintain their market competitiveness, bricks and mortar stores such as Doorway to Value must find alternative approaches to attract customers, to generate revenue and safeguard employment. The applicant has identified that the existing floor space of the store does not currently provide the critical mass required to secure the longevity of the business. Additional floor space is therefore required to create a destination store, which will enable additional product lines to be made available to customers. These qualitative improvements are essential to the sustainability and longevity of the business, helping to protect the existing jobs whilst also creating additional employment opportunities. The application site is located within the green belt, but as your officers have confirmed, the proposed extension only gives rise to limited harm. There are a series of considerations which cumulatively materially outweigh this limited harm. These are the very special circumstances needed to justify approval of the proposed development today. These include the need for an established local business to invest and expand, enhancing its capacity to respond to economic challenges and securing its long-term financial sustainability, as I've explained already. It will allow the applicant to secure the 37 existing jobs in the local area and generate up to 15 new additional jobs, as well as indirect employment opportunities in construction and the supply chain. The expansion will allow the store to become very much more sustainable. This will be achieved through the use of solar panels and incorporation of energy-saving measures within the building's fabric. Ultimately, this will result in a 33% reduction in the amount of carbon emissions against the building regulations baseline, and will contribute to the borough's objectives of becoming net zero by 2030. It will provide a high quality expansion of the existing retail store in a prominent gateway location on the edge of the settlement, incorporating high quality materials and enhancing the visual amenity of the site. The site is easily accessible by a range of means, including walking, cycling and public transport, and provides a sufficient level of car parking, and the applicant is committed to enhancing the access to the site as agreed with LCC Highways. I hope that you're able to support your officer's recommendation and approve the application so that long-term sustainability of the doorway to value can be secured. Many thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Over to you, members. Councillor Marwood.
Thank you, Chair. I think the officers and the agent have made a good case for this application, and I'm happy to support the recommendation. It's important. I think they've made a good case in terms of its sustainability. If it doesn't adapt, this is a well-established business which we want to keep in Chorley. They're taking up the green belt, which is a bit of their huge car park. So taking each of these applications, on its merits, I'm happy to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Beaver.
Just coming out of the pandemic, bit of good news. People are expanding with business improving, so I would gladly second that.
Okay. Anybody else wish to comment? If not, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the officer recommendation, please show. Okay. Check you voted the right way. If none, then okay, Taz.
Thank you, Chair. So, committee has decided to grant planning permission subject to conditions in respect of the erection of a two-storey extension to south side, installation of overcladding to the existing store frontage and installation of solar photovoltaic panels and alterations to car park and layout in respect of doorway to value. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Taz. Item 4, appeals report, pages 127 to 128. Adele.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, members will note that there are 3 appeal decisions that are reported on the agenda today, and they are all the applications that they all relate to safeguarded sites within the local plan. There are 2 more outstanding appeals which we're expecting shortly for Carrington Road and Parr Lane. Members will note that Blainscow appeal was allowed and the Tinklers Lane appeal was allowed. The appeal at Town Lane was dismissed on the basis that the inspector accepted that the highway safety impacts would be severe. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Whittaker, you wanted to comment.
Thanks, Chair. You'll not be surprised, and I'll try and be as brief as I can, Chair, that that is May. Well, first of all, congratulations to the one at Whittle-Le-Woods that residents managed to get. However, the dismay that's been felt in Eccleston regarding the decision to overturn our decision has been really palpable. One of the concerns, I'll talk about it later, but one of the things that came up just after the decision was raised was regarding the perception that the inspector had got the foul and surface water drainage altogether wrong. It's shown on paragraph 73 of her report. It's a 27-page report, so I don't expect everybody to have got it. And it shows the condition, paragraph 15, that they're suggesting the first reserve matters application shall be accompanied by a foul and sustainable surface water drainage strategy for the whole site to be submitted and approved in writing to the local planning authority. Some of the residents were concerned about the inadequacy of the lead flood authority's response, but be that as it may, we are where we are. And paragraph 22, conditions, one of the other issues was about the slab levels on the site, which could have been higher and exacerbate the flooding area, paragraph 22 of the inspector's report. So before I start on the actual decision itself, could I ask, Chair, that before or when those conditions are approved or submitted to the planning officers, that both you and the Chair and the Vice Chair agree them with a view to either bringing them back to committee if they're not. I'm happy to leave it to you and the Vice Chair to deal with it, Chair, but they are of great concern to the residents of the village. So that's the first point, Chair. The second point is that the inspector seems to have ignored all the comments made by residents in a similar way to the one that was alluded to at Hall Lane. And the leader of the council made some very forthright comments about what he felt about that decision. For example, the inspector's report contradicts itself. On the one hand, it says our criticisms are of methodology and it is not the inspector's remit to challenge the methodology. But on the other hand, the inspector says situations like this, where policy isn't clear, it's for the inspector to use their own judgment. What it leaves us with, and I'm quoting from Alistair, what it leaves us with a mess where decisions are made by locally accountable councillors via the democratic process or overturned by a government inspector. And the heart of the issue is whether the council could evidence a 5-year supply of housing to meet government targets, but the goalposts constantly change. Our MP made some representations on behalf of Blainscow. I'm sorry to say, from what I can gather, that the MP for South Ribble was conspicuous by her absence. And it says, the inspector said, at the couple one, inspector said, 123 homes are nothing in the grand scheme of things, so wouldn't affect any future plans. Tell that to the residents of Coppell. Tell that to the residents of Eccleston. We're 80 here and another 15 just down the field. 95 properties are going to go on in terms of schools, in terms of medical facilities, in terms of highway facilities. It'll be gridlocked. And then, and the final thing I want to say, Chair, sorry, that's me, I think. Forgive me. Forgive me. I managed to have to hand the financial settlement sent out by the Right Honourable Michael Gove MP, who's the Secretary of State, to give him his full title, for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. And the final paragraph says, and I'm reading, councils are in the front line of public services with local communities and are the first port of call for so many people, from delivering critical social care services at every stage of people's lives to making sure that we have efficient and effective waste management services in place. This government recognises the vital role that local authorities play in our society. Plainly, the inspectors don't. And I think this is a disgrace, Chair. We talk about levelling up. This is levelling down. We find reasons in Oxfordshire and other parts of the country for varying conditions. This methodology, which is so-called a scientifically proved thing, it's flawed, Chair. And the residents of places like Eccleston and Mawdesley and all the other rural areas, because once this safeguarded land is gone, where are we going to go? The answer is we're going to go into the green belt. And then we'll have some more fun. And then we'll have some other arguments about methodology. So I'm dismayed at this appeal decision, Chair, as are the people of Eccleston, and I hope they'll make their representations to Mr Gove and Mrs Fletcher. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm more concerned about us not having, I should say, 5 years supply of housing ongoing, putting pressure on sites having the safeguarded land and in the new plan, probably the green belt. I'm hoping the officers won't be pressured into proposing acceptance of some sites through this appeal decision.
Adele?
Yeah, I think it's incumbent on me to give members the assurance that officers will not be pressured into making a decision that doesn't stand up, and we will scrutinise all applications as we always do, and we will look at them objectively.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to turn this into a political rant like some of my colleagues. The Planning Inspectorate has made a decision on 3 application sites that we've got here. We turned them all down. If we got the chance actually on some of them, but we didn't. I will say for the record that I don't agree with the planning inspectors' decisions. I do agree with our own decisions that we made in this room. But the content of what the planning inspectorate has put in their reports is very interesting and something that we as a council should be really mindful of. Councillor Whittaker is fully aware that the planning inspectorate has made several references all the way through the documentation of each three reports with regards to the Chorley Council's 5-year housing supply. It is clearly demonstrated we don't have a 5-year housing supply. We have tried and tried with our colleagues in South Ribble and Preston to share the burden over the 5 years, and we haven't been successful. Therefore, we are still in a position where we have to deliver at minimum 417, and if you use the standard methodology, over 500. So I'm the same as Councillor Heaton. Where is this council going to find that 5-year housing supply for? Because this isn't going to be the last time we see planning appeals coming forward against this committee. And we need to take action now. We don't need to take action in 5 years' time. We have a local plan coming through in 2023, but we have a period of time between now and 2023 where we have the floodgates can potentially open. And I'm seriously concerned about this. The planning inspector officer also makes comment regarding the over-delivery or over-supply within the early years of the local plan. And we can't ignore that. There was significant over-delivery. Now, I do have sympathy for the council and this committee that we're at a time when the likes of Buckshore Village are coming forward. But we have the powers within this committee to slow down the flow of housing that's put onto our borough. The decisions are up to us. It's up to us to make them over the next few years, and I really do hope that we look at each application under its own merits against our housing need.
Councillor Whittaker, but before that, no, we don't have to. I don't agree with you on a couple of your comments there about supply of land. So, Councillor Whittaker.
Thanks, Chair. I take a little bit of offence at a suggestion of a political rant. I tried to be as objective as I could. I tried to refer to the methodology that is flawed. Councillor Boardman ignores the fact that Chorley's built more houses than South Ribble and Preston put together. And yet we're still tied up by this government methodology, and we can remember Mr. Jarren, or whatever his name was, what's his name again? Jenrick, who got sacked. Build, build, build. This is what we want to do. We can't ignore the politics of the situation. We've got a government minister who's supposed to be levelling up, and all he's looking at is the fact that Chorley's built all these houses, and the methodology says you've built so many, therefore you've got to build some more. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Now, that's not a political rant. That's a political reality. If we can, I'm waiting to see Councillor Boardman come up with some of these sites that he thinks of that are appropriate for developing, and we'll see where they are.
Through the chair, if you're going to make any comment. I must agree with you, Councillor Whitcomb. I didn't think you had a political rant. I thought you did very well, actually, for what you could have done. I think we've discussed it. There's nothing we can do now. Will somebody second that? All those in favour of the report, please, if accepting the report, please show. I know. Because I'm not going into falling out over here in here now. Right. With that, I conclude the meeting and have a safe journey home, everybody.